My country, Canada, is a country that's made up of two linguistic groups. There used to be two ethnic groups, but now I would say it's two ethno-linguistic groups, or just linguistic groups. There's the English speakers and the French speakers. That's just the reality of the country I live in, and it's going to stay that way for the foreseeable future. Now, if you study the history of Britain and France and their relations with each other and the attitudes that each country, the people of each country has towards the other, you start to wonder whether or not it is possible for these two peoples to live together in peace and harmony for as long as they have done so in Canada, because they're just as different in Canada. The French Canadians aren't like the French people in France at all, and the English Canadians aren't like the British at all, but they are just as different as they are in Europe. If you read the newspapers, if you watch the media, there's a constant low-level squabble fight going on between the English and the French. But one of the interesting things that you notice is that it's almost never personal. There are exceptions to this. It does get personal sometimes. But even the hardcore separatists and the hardcore Anglo, I guess, bigots would totally dismiss the idea that this could lead to an ethnic conflict, and I think that that's correct. I don't see how that could possibly happen. As groups, the two sides are often sniping at each other, and often every couple of decades they actually seem to get very close to an actual conflict. But even so, it's even at the height of the conflicts, it doesn't look as though it will ever turn into anything even remotely resembling Northern Ireland or Bosnia or Lebanon or whatever. The depth of feeling as individual people simply isn't there. Now, this reminds me of my experiences traveling in the Islamic world. In many Arab countries, or in many Muslim countries, you will often hear extremely inflammatory anti-Western rhetoric. I've never heard anyone say death to America, but I've heard some people say some pretty choice things about the Iraq War or Palestine, things like this, which could be considered quite vitriolic when describing, in particular, the United States, but also Britain. Increasingly, Britain is getting its share of the abuse now. But anyone from the West who has actually traveled in the Islamic world will note there's this strange disconnect between this anti-Westernism, this desire to burn the American flag or vilify the United States or call it the Great Satan or anything or something like that, and the treatment or the reception you get in the street. The one bears almost no relation to the other, and in the Islamic world it's almost this sort of benign schizophrenia, I suppose, or a benign split personality that they have, where the average person simply doesn't equate the average American with U.S. foreign policy. They might blithely tell you your foreign policy sucks, but by the same token, they don't have anything at all against you as an individual. In particularly tense times, it can, like I say, at the Jyllands-Posten era, when there was all that problem with the Danish cartoon, I know that a lot of white people in the Islamic world felt a little bit uncomfortable, but no one actually feared for their safety. No one actually thought they were going to be killed, and it blew over. Things like this will always blow over, if you ask me. So I think that people should bear in mind that what goes on in the newspapers, what goes on in politics, what goes on in rhetoric, bears very little resemblance to what actually happens in the streets. The rhetoric that you do read in the newspapers can be disturbing, just as disturbing as it can be for a Muslim who reads certain opinion columns in the newspapers here in the West, things that are said about Islam and the Islamic world. It can make you very, very uneasy. But apart from very isolated cases, the general picture is, I would even say, a warm welcome that Westerners get in the Islamic world. I can speak with some experience about that because I've actually been to large parts of the Islamic world. And Gabiotta's depiction of the hospitality that you receive in the Islamic world is in many ways understated. In some parts of it, you'll be herded into the dining room or the equivalent, stuffed full of food, and generally treated like a king, simply because their sense of obligation to foreigners or to visitors to their country demands that they do this. And it is genuine. It's often it's curiosity. Like, they see you and they say, well, gee, maybe Westerners aren't as bad as the newspapers say that they are. Why is this guy so decent about everything? And I think that the overwhelming majority of people that go and visit the Islamic world come back with that impression. And I think that people that actually take the time to go and visit the Islamic world and make the effort to visit the Islamic world as itself are generally of a fairly respectful bent. They don't want to go there and cause trouble. And the people that live there see this, and they reciprocate. And they reciprocate even more strongly than one might expect. Islamic hospitality, Arab hospitality in particular, is no joke. It's a real thing. I've gone to Turkey and Tunisia. That's just the two main ones that I've been to, and I think I gained about 5 pounds on each trip, simply from being stuffed full of food. I do tend to go out of the large tourist areas to go to the smaller places, and people generally are not so familiar with Westerners and not so either standoffish or blasé. So yes, it's actually true that you get a very, very skewed picture of the Islamic world, and they get a very skewed picture of us when we rely solely upon what we read in the newspapers and what we see on television. I don't even think that the news is manipulated as much as some people believe it is. It's just that the sensational stuff is the only stuff that people will actually bother to watch when it's on. You don't want to watch the news when somebody is sitting in somebody else's house eating delicious food prepared by the guy's wife and served to him by his daughter. This doesn't make it to the news. But it's something that actually, if you ask me, far more represents the true picture of the relationship between the average Westerner and the average Muslim. Thank you.